morning, everyone. Welcome to teaching learning session of sociology. Today, we'll start with a new course that is BSOC 134, Research in Social Sciences. Today's topic is Research in Social Sciences, as research plays a very important role, right? Uh, why is it required to do research? Why we conduct research, right? Research means you search again, right, for new things, right? Social research, what is social research? It's a systemized effort to gain new knowledge, right? Research is what, when you systematically make efforts, right, in a systematic way, when you make efforts to gain new knowledge, that is research. Social research helps in adding a new knowledge by supporting or disagreeing with the existing form of knowledge. As such, research, if you will divide research, it comes as re plus search. We are searching again, right, for new pool of knowledge. That is how we are searching, how we are getting. When you gain some new knowledge, right, that is research. And it helps, this social research, why is it required? It helps in adding a new pool of knowledge to the existing knowledge, or whether you agree or you can disagree with the existing pool of knowledge, right? So you can agree and add on some new knowledge to the existing knowledge, or you can disagree with the existing knowledge and give some new input, right? That is research, right? Social sciences research can be defined as an act of re-examining the social world with the goals of better understanding and explaining why or how people behave. That is research, right? What is research? If we define the research in social sciences, it is re-examining, as I said, research. You're searching it, re-examining something, re-examining the social world, the phenomenon of the social world. What is the goal behind that? The goal is for to better understanding or explaining why or how people behave, why people behave in a certain way, and how they behave in a particular condition. This definition emphasis on rediscovery process that is always rooted in research. Okay, so it is renewed search or re-examination, right? P.V. Young defines social research as a systematic method of discovering the new facts or verifying the old facts, their sequence, interrelationship, causal explanation, and natural laws which govern them. This is the proper definition of the research. If you go by the definition given by Young, P.V. Young, he defined research as a systematic method. Remember this, systematic. This word is very important. It's a systematic method of discovering of a new facts, right? You are discovering, when you want to discover something new, you have to do it in a systematic way. It is a systematic method of discovering the new facts or verifying the old facts. Even if you agree with this and you want to verify the old facts, there should be a systematic way to verify the old facts. When you want to discover new facts or verifying the old facts, their sequence, their interrelationship, the causal relationship, and natural laws which govern them is Stephenson defines social research as manipulation of things, concepts, or symbols for the purpose of generalizing to extend correct and verifying knowledge, whether that knowledge aids in construction of a theory or in practice of an art. Right? It can also be defined as comprising of defining and redefining the problem, formulating the hypothesis, or suggesting the solution, collecting, organizing, and evaluating the data, making deductions, and making conclusion, and at last carefully testing the conclusion to determine whether fit the formulated hypothesis. See, this is the proper way of research we conduct the research, right? It can also define, it can also be, it starts with defining the problem or redefining the problem, right? When you are when there is a pool of knowledge and you agree with it and you want to give something new, you redefine the problem or you define something new, right? So it is defining or redefining the problem, right? After defining or redefining the problem, what you do, you formulate the hypothesis. What is hypothesis? An educated guess is known as hypothesis, right? You formulate the hypothesis, then you test for those hypotheses, right? You formulate the hypothesis on the basis of the objectives. That is objective. How you get your objective? Through, when you define the problem, what are your aim? Objectives are the aim, what you want to find out. On the basis of that, you formulate the hypothesis, then you suggest the solution. How you suggest the solution? You collect the data to define or to verify. You collect and or you collect the data related to your problem, then you organize that data, evaluate that data, and after evaluating that data, you make deduction, you interpret that data, right? And on the basis of that, you conclude, right? And that testing and conclusion, and then you conclude and then test and conclude, and then you can determine whether the for whether this whether your hypothesis is accepted or rejected, whether it fits to your hypothesis or not, right? So this is, you can also define it as in this way, and this is the proper way to conduct a research, right? And see, it is very important that a researcher should follow the rules. Researcher should think logically, should not be biased. It is very important. If you conduct if you want to conduct a research and generalize your results of your research, it is very important that researcher should not be biased, should be unbiased, and should think logically. Researcher should follow the rules and follow these steps over and again, right? A researcher combines theories or ideas with the fact in a systematic way and uses his or her imaginations and creativity, right? What are the alternatives to the social research? See, there are various ways you can conduct the researches, social sciences researches. There are various alternative, and one of those alternative is common senses. Sociology draws a great deal of common sense. Sociological knowledge tends to be generalized, if not universal, and common senses knowledge is particular and localized. Right? Common senses is not only localized, it is also unreflective since it doesn't question its own origin and presupposition. Sociology helps us to understand the society, and this could be deepened and broadened by the systematic comparison between one society with the other. And common senses is not in a position to reach an understanding. One way is the common senses. Common senses is when you understand something, right? By through common sense, and common sense knowledge is particularly localized. It is localized. You can understand only those things where you are localized. It is localized, and it is very difficult to compare and contrast the various societies on the basis of uh, common senses, right? It is common senses is not in a position to reach an understanding, right? This becomes possible because sociology make use of its tools and techniques for a systematic investigation, right? Common senses, what common senses involves? Common senses involve preconception, which is rejected by the sociology. See, it is very important that you should think logically and should conduct the research in a systematic and the scientific way. And common senses involves preconception shows that researcher is biased, and you cannot, when researcher is biased, you cannot generalize the research results of that research, right? Right. So this common senses involves preconception, and this preconception is rejected by the sociology, right? Common sense is easily constructs imaginary social arrangement, which is utopian, right? And why sociology is anti-utopian, and its central preoccupation with disjunction between ideal reality and human society, right? uh, Sociology does not accept the particular constraint taken for granted by common senses as eternal or immutable. See, we take the things in sociology. Sociology is utopian types of common sense. I'm sorry, common sense is utopian, and sociology is against utopian types. And in common senses, takes the oh, this common senses are granted as eternal or immutable, right? While sociology values the neutral and free of all form of biases, right? Okay. For etymologist, common senses is a constant achievement in which people draw on implicit rule of how to carry on, and which produces a sense of organization and coherences. See, etymologists find it a good tool. Find common senses is a good tool because they feel like that common senses is a common achievement in which people draw in implicit rule how to carry, and which produces a sense of organization and coherence. See, common sense is it is quite common. If people are behaving in a particular way, then we should behave in a particular way. There is nothing written like this, but we start imitating others, right? What majority is doing, we consider it correct. Whether it is correct or not, that could be questionable, right? But common sense says yes, it is acceptable in this society, we should do this. So it's a constant achievement. It draws on the implicit rules, right? And people start and it helps in, according to etymologist, it produces a sense of organization and coherence, right? For symbolic interactionist, who has given this concept interaction was Thane. I hope you remember. For symbolic interactionist and other interpretative sociologists, there is a rigorous analysis of common senses knowledge, but the central aim of sociology is seen as expliciting and elaborating the people's conception of the social world. This is symbolic interactionist. This it is that. There is a less rigorous analysis of a common senses knowledge, but it is important to understand this, right? For Durkheim, sociology must break free from the prejudices of common senses perception before it can produce scientific knowledge to the social world. Yes, obviously. According to Durkheim, Durkheim is a positivist. And as we discuss about the Durkheim, according to Durkheim, it is possible to conduct social sciences researches as we conduct the natural sciences researches, that is in a scientific way. And to conduct a research in a scientific way, it is very important that it should be bias free. Researcher should not be biased, or it should be free of prejudices, right? So common senses we can say common senses are biased, right? Because it is localized, so you cannot generalize the results. You can These common senses could not, according to Durkheim, could not produce the scientific knowledge to the social world, right? For Marxist, much common senses knowledge is ideological, or at least very limited in its understanding of the world. According to the this common sense is ideological and is very limited in its understanding of the world, but according to symbolic interactionist or interpretative sociologist, this common sense plays an important role, right? Okay. Then next is personal experiences. What are the personal experiences? Many things in this world are understood to be true on the basis of personal experiences, and it is considered to be a legitimate source of knowledge. So it is personal. What is the personal experiences? See, personal experiences. It is considered to be the legitimate source of the knowledge, while knowledge based on the personal experiences can lead us astray, right? What is considered to be true may be result of some form of distortion in judgment, which leads to an error, right? So, personal experiences varies from individual to individual, right? So, when we take that personal experience to be true, it may result in some form of distortion in judgment. It can distort the judgment, which can lead to an error, right? Personal experiences can lead to four types of the error. First is overgeneralization, the second is selective observation, third is premature closure, and fourth is halo effect. So, this personal experiences can lead to a four type of errors: overgeneralization, selective observation, premature closure, and halo effect. What is overgeneralization? Overgeneralization occurs when one has some evidence that one believes and then assume that it applies to many other situations. Sometimes this may go far beyond what can be justified based on the data or empirical observation that one has, because it is on the basis of the personal observations, take a personal experience, right? So overgeneralization, at times you have some personal experiences and you generalize that it could happen to many, and it could be you can believe that it applies to many other situations. This could be overgeneralized, right? Sometimes it could be far beyond what can be justified based on the data or the empirical observation. So you can overgeneralize at sometimes when you go by personal experiences. It might have happened with someone, but it is not it could not be true that it could happen with everyone or majority, or it could be or it could not be. So overgeneralization could lead to an error when you overgeneralize that it could happen to many situations. Then selective observation, as the name indicates, occurs when an individual takes a special notice of a small portion of a reality and generalized from them. Selective observation involves making observation in a way that it reinforces existing thinking rather than observation in neutral and a balanced manner. So it is selective observation. What is selective observation? When you take a small notice of a small portion of the reality, you notice a small portion of the reality and then you overgeneralize or generalized from them, right? uh, it could lead to an error that this overgeneralization or this selective observation reinforces the existing thinking rather than observation as a neutral and a balanced manner. So it could be biased because you have given attention, you paid attention to the small portion of the reality, and then you generalized that. It could be problematic. Then premature closure. Premature closure, what is premature closure? Occurs when the researcher feels that he has all the answers and do not need to listen, seek information, or raise question any longer. It means that the researcher makes a judgment or ends an investigation before one has an amount or depth of evidence required by the scientific standards. That is premature closure, as name indicate, premature closure. That is when researcher feels like that now he or she has answer of all the questions and doesn't need any answers, any further data, right? So the researcher makes a judgment or ends an investigation before the required amount or depth of the evidence is required by the scientific standard. That is premature closure. Halo effect states that we overgeneralize from what we believe to be highly positive or prestigious. We allow the prior reputation of a person, places, or thing to color one's evaluation rather than evaluating in a neutral or an equal manner. That is an halo effect. Halo effect is when we have some a prior reputation of a person, prior on the basis of the prior reputation of the person or a place or a thing, that overpowers the and neutral aspect of the research, right? When we evaluate someone on the basis of prior reputation, that is the halo effect. So it could be because of the personal experience. So personal experience can lead to type of errors, that is overgeneralization, right? Overgeneralization, halo effect, premature closure, and selective observations, right? So it could lead to an error, right? Sociological imaginations in social research. Sociological, what is sociological imagination? It's a sociological vision, a way at looking at the world that can see connection between the apparent private problem of an individual and important social issues. So this is sociological imagination, right? It's a sociological vision, right? What is imagination? It's a sociological vision. What is the sociological vision means? That it is a way at looking at the world, right? That can see connection between apparently private problem of the individual and important social issues. The sociological imaginations require us to think ourselves away from the familiar routine of our daily lives in order to look at them anew, right? So what sociological imagination requires? Sociological imagination requires to think ourselves away from the familiar routine of our daily lives in order to look at them as a new, right? We should come out of our biasedness. It argues for a humanist sociological connection, the social, personal, and the historical dimensions of our lives, and which is a critical of abstract empiricism and a grand theory alike. Right? Okay. Durkheim and his prescriptions for sociological research. Durkheim, we discussed about Durkheim in detail in our last few lectures, right? As we know that Durkheim is the one, because of the Durkheim we are able to study the sociology as a subject, right? Durkheim is a positivist, right? Durkheim advocated two basic procedures for establishing the sociological proof. According to Durkheim, we can study the social, we can carry out research on social sciences, that is on social topics, as we can conduct the research on the natural sciences. So we can follow the rules according to Durkheim. We can conduct the research on the basis of the rules, conduct the social sciences research on the basis of the rules of natural sciences, right? So he advocated the two basic procedures, the examinations of the cause and effect relationship between the social phenomenon. He advocated to understand the social, that is the cause and effect phenomenon, current Karan Siddhant. Right? If something is happening, why it is happening? What is the reason behind that? If someone is behaving in a particular way, why? Why society is behaving in a particular way? If some changes, if there are some changes going on in this society, the reason, one should understand the reason, that is the cause and the relationship effect. So he emphasized on the examination of cause and relationship, cause and effect relationship between the social phenomenon. And the second procedure was method of concomitant variations, right? Concomitant variation, to examine the cause and effect relationship. According to Durkheim, a comparison could be made on those phenomena where both were simultaneously present, and see whether the variation they display in their circumstances suggest then one depends upon the other. So if you want to see, according to the Durkheim, that you should uh, study the phenomenon that where both were simultaneously, both phenomenon should be present simultaneously, and one should observe whether the variation they display in these circumstances suggest that one depends on the other, that there is a change in the one phenomenon because of the change in the other phenomenon. Are they dependent upon each other? So this is study of that is cause and effect relationship, right? When the phenomenon can be artificially created and the will of the observer, the method called the experimental method. On the contrary, if production of the fact is not within our control and we can only bring them together in a way that have been spontaneously produced, the method employed is called the indirect experiment or the comparative method, right? When you create situations to study, when you create an artificial situation to understand some phenomenon, then that situation is known as the experimental method. That method is known as the experimental method. And when right and when if production of the effect is not within the control of the researcher and that occurs spontaneously, then that method employed is called the indirect experiment or the comparative methods, right? Okay. For Durkheim, the sociological explanation rests exclusively in connecting the phenomenon to its cause or a cause to its effect, since the social phenomena are beyond the control of a researcher and can escape the experimental comparative method. For Durkheim was only method for a for suitable method suitable for the sociology. As see, in society, that in sociological research, that it is very difficult to control these situations, right? As social phenomena are beyond the control of the researcher. So, when social control is beyond the control of the researcher, then what type of research we can carry out? Then that procedure is spontaneous procedure. That then we can employ the indirect experiment or comparative method. So, according to Durkheim, that it is not possible for a researcher to control the social phenomenon. So we can conduct only the comparative method or the comparative type of a research in social sciences, right? It is the only suitable method for the sociology, right? And he rejected the historical method advocated by the Comte. Comte, if you remember who is Comte, Comte is known as father of sociology, and he rejected the historical method that is advocated by the Comte. According to the Durkheim, we can study the sociological facts or the sociological phenomenon only through comparative method, right? Durkheim argued that not all form of comparative method were equally applicable to study of the social facts. He proposed the three methods by which such systematic variation might be formed. So, first is when dealing with very general facts about which we have extensive statistical data, the sociologist might limit his study to a single unique society. Right? If you have a pool of knowledge about some fact, right? When researcher has extensive statistical data, then researcher might limit his or her study to a single unique society. The second method is collecting fact from several societies of the same social types, make available a more extensive field of comparison. The second method is when you collect the data on the same phenomenon from the various societies so that you can compare and contrast. Now, the sociologist could now confront the history of one society with another to see if the same phenomenon evolves over a time in response to the same conditions. But this method is applicable only to the phenomenon which have arisen during the existence of the societies in questions. and thus ignores the part of society social organization which is inherited, ready made, or the earlier societies. So first method is when you have enough data and then you can study any phenomenon of a unique society. But second method could be when you compare and contrast more than when you compare and contrast many societies. But the important thing is this method is applicable which have arisen during the existence of these societies in questions, right? And the third method was a genetic method. The genetic method yields both the analysis and synthesis of the fact understanding by showing each component element of the phenomenon was successively added to other. It reveals them in their disassociated state and means of broad field of comparison. So it is genetic method in which the analysis and the synthesis, if that both analysis and synthesis are combined together, right? That this shows how one component of element of phenomenon was successively added to the other, right? How one impacted the other, right? According to Durkheim, that social research is that it is independent from all the biases or all the preconceptions, whether it's a philosophical or practical, and it should be objective, right? As we said that as per Durkheim, we can conduct the social sciences research as as we conduct the research in natural sciences, and objectively, in short, we can conduct social sciences research objectively. So, according to Durkheim, it is the research in social sciences should be independent of all the preconceptions or the biases, right? See, there are two types of the researches in social sciences. That is the qualitative research and the quantitative research. We conduct the two type of the researches: qualitative researches and the quantitative researches. Qualitative research in social sciences basically depends on the observation and interaction in the field where the research is being conducted, right? As the name indicates, qualitative. When someone is in the field, the researcher observes the thing. When a researcher interacts with many others in the field, then this the qualitative research depends on the observation and the interaction of the researcher, right? The interaction with the subject is done in the language of the subject, and this tradition of doing research owes a lot to anthropology, right? Anthropologists like Franz Boas, Evan Pritchard have contributed immensely towards the development of this tradition of doing the research. In sociology, this way of doing research gained a prominence under the guidance of Robert E. Park. So that whether it's a Boas or the Pritchard or the Park, they conducted a qualitative type of the research when the researcher is in the field, and when the in field when researcher observes the certain phenomenon, and when the researcher interacts with this subject related subject, and when he gets the input from the research and he interacts the researcher in his or her language, that is in subject's language, right? He gets some input, and that on the basis of those inputs he conduct the research. And this research is quite common in anthropologists like Boas and Pritchard and E. Park carried out these types of the researches, right? Qualitative research is naturalistic and participatory and ethnographic in its approach. It is naturalistic when you conduct the research in natural phenomenon, in the natural environment, when the observer or the researcher goes to the field. So it is qualitative research is conducted in is natural phenomenon. It is naturalistic. It is participatory because the Subject participates in that research. You conduct interviews, or when you interact with these subjects, so it is a participatory type of a research. And the ethnography in its approach, right, when you observe the things. Qualitative research is an approach to study the social world which seeks to describe and analyze the cultural behavior of the humans and their group from point of view of these being studied, right. Along with the observation method, unstructured interviews in which the researcher provides a minimal guidance and allows a considerable latitude for the interviews is also a favored technique, right. That you conduct the qualitative research through observation method, right, and through semi-structured interview, or through unstructured, basically through unstructured interviews, right. The sources of data are varied and include the diaries, autobiography, and from other various historical books, right. A group discussion could be the method used for the qualitative research, right. It is essentially a form of unstructured interview but involves more than one subject, right. So, how you conduct the qualitative research? Qualitative research is where it is a participatory type of a research, and it is the observatory. It is a naturalistic type of a research, and ethnographical type of a research, in which the researcher goes to the field, observes the thing, and conduct the unstructured interviews with the subject, and the subject participates in the research. The researcher participates in the research, and the researcher observes the various phenomenon, and on the basis of this they conduct the research, and it is quite common in anthropology. Qualitative research derives from a different intellectual underpinnings. The qualitative research, the main intellectual undercurrents which tend to view as providing qualitative research with a distinct epistemology are phenomenology, symbolic interaction, Varsthane, naturalism, and ethnogenics. So, phenomenologist prefers or qualitative research. So, we conduct the qualitative research in phenomenology. Symbolic interaction or Vasthane, right? Symbolic interaction is why people behave in a particular way. It is very important to understand the reasons of a behavior of a individual in a particular way. Vasthane, this concept has been given by the Max Weber. Naturalism and ethnogenesis. What is phenomenology? Phenomenological perspective in sociology reject many of the assumptions of the positivism. So this phenomenology rejects many of the assumptions given by the positivist. It involves a systematic investigation of the consciousness, which is considered to be only phenomenon that can be sure of. So, what phenomenology involves? It involves the systematic study of the consciousness, right? Phenomenologists argue that the subject matter of social and natural sciences is fundamentally different. They differ from the positivist approach. They assume that the method and assumption of natural sciences are inappropriate to of the opinion that natural sciences deals with the matter, and to understand it is enough to observe them from the outside. They do not have the consciousness and the purpose which direct their behavior. While this is not true for the society or human beings. According to phenomenologists, we cannot research of social sciences research as per the natural sciences research. We cannot follow the rules of natural sciences in conducting the research on social phenomena, right? So natural sciences, according to phenomenologists, natural sciences deals with the matter. Uh, that is, we can observe that matter from the outside, right? They do not have how we can do that? Because they don't have consciousness. They do not have any meaning or the purpose. Phenomenologist believes that unlike matter, man has consciousness, thoughts, feelings, meaning, intentions, and aware of being. So, how you can study someone who is not alive or a matter, that someone who has not conscious? They don't, as matter, don't have the consciousness, while this human being have consciousness. They have thoughts, feelings, meanings, intentions, and are of being and awareness of being. Because of this action and meaning, because of this, his actions are meaningful. He defines the situation and give meaning to his actions and those of others. As a result, he does not simply react to the external stimuli. He does not simply behave, but he acts. So when they have a feelings, when they have thoughts, when they have consciousness, when they have meanings, right? They give meaning to each and every situation, and according to meaning, they behave, they act. They don't only behave, but they act according to the situation. So how you can study an non that is living thing with a non-living thing, right? If action comes from the subjective meaning, it follows that sociologists must discover. If action comes from the subjective meaning, it follows that sociologists must discover those meaning in order to understand the action, right? It is very, according to phenomenologist, it is very important for the sociologist that one should understand, that sociologist must discover or must understand meaning of the actions, the subjective meaning of the actions or the act of an individual, right? Sociologist cannot simply observe the actions from the outside and impose an external logic upon it. He must interpret the internal logic which directs the action of an actor. Right? Right. So, according to phenomenologist, it is important that you can, one should not, that sociologist should not observe the thing from the external side um, and then imposes some external logic upon it. That sociologist must interpret the internal logic, right? And this internal logic directs the action of an actor. And Max Weber was the one of the first sociologists to outline this perspective in Versthane, right? It is very important that one should understand the actions, the why someone is behaving in a particular way, and you could not do it by observing from outside. One should be the part of that thing, that society, and observe and understand the situations, and then one should link the action of an individual with those situations, right? So phenomenologists disagree with the positivists. Next is symbolic interactionism. What is symbolic interactionism? Symbolic interactionism advocates that meaning emerges through the process of interaction, right? It views the social life as a process in which the individual interprets his environments and acts on the basis of the interpretation. This is symbolic interaction. How we behave in how we behave, first we interprets the environment, and then we act on the basis of those interpretation. right? So symbolic interaction is advocates the meaning emerges from the process of interaction. That is what is the meaning of the process of interaction, that the individual, that in social life, that individual interprets the environment and according to the interpretations, according to his interpretation about the environment, right? There are two definitions, the definition of situation and the social self. Definition of the situation means that the idea that people's actions are shaped more by subjective meaning given to their situation than by purely objective aspect of the situation. That is, you should understand the situation. So what is this situation? That it is this, giving the subjective meaning to the situation, defining it on the, or objectively on the objective aspects, right? The social self is a process. Self is a result of dialect between I and me. I me theory. We talked about this theory, right? So the social self is a process. Self is a result of dialect between I and me. Action and interaction is a part of process. We do not simply act, but we act on the basis of how we define the situation and how we think other will view the actions, right? So I and me, see. So it is according to symbolic interactionist, it is very important that one should understand the situation and should define the situation on subjective manner rather than the objective manner. And one should self is the dialect between I and me. So action and the interaction, what is action and interaction? Action and interaction is a part, right? But we do not simply act, but we act on the basis of what we define the situation is and how we think others will view our actions. Then on the basis of this we interact, right? So there are the characteristics of qualitative research. There are the various characteristics of the qualitative research. The first is the subject's perspective. The most important characteristics of qualitative research is that it sees the events, actions, norms, values, etc. from the point of view of the subject of the people being studied. Therefore, it becomes important for researcher to spend a in the field. So, subjective perspective. So, qualitative research emphasizes subject's perspective. That is, subject's perspectives means that is the people being studied. It is understand their perspective. And to understand the subject's perspective, it is very important that researchers should spend a long time in the field. Next is description. Next characteristic is of the very essential characteristic is to describe the social self being studied in the greater details. It particular context and give hint to the realities. So describe the social settings, why some event is why some event happened, or why something is happening, or why individuals are behaving in a particular way. It is very important to give the right. So it helps to understand what is happening in a particular context, right? It is important to describe the particular context in which something is happening or happened. It gives the hint of the realities. Next is context. Qualitative research entails that we understood these social entities as a whole in their paternity, right? The implication of context is that the meaning give to their own behavior have to be seen in context beliefs and practices underlying and this multiply the perception that there. Next is the dynamic social life, right? Social life is not static, it is dynamic. right? This social life, it looks, if you look at this social life, there are the series of events that tend to emphasize on changes, right? So there are various events which are interconnected, and social life is dynamic and it impacts our actions and interactions, right? Flexible and lack of structure. Qualitative research is open and unstructured and do not seem to decide what to study beforehand. Because of this, proponent of qualitative research argues that it allows them to access unexpected but important topics. So, the qualitative research is flexible and lack of structure. We'll discuss more about this in our next lecture. Thank you very much. Namaskar.